welcome to another House of Wisdom Lightest and Best Knife Review, where we look at the lightest and best offerings from a variety of knife manufacturers. And today we have a treat for you, and it's a little bit of a retrospective. We have the Hinder PT in 3 different variations. This is the Hinder PT, the original one, which is called the Lego form. We also have the PTCC. CC stands for concealed carry. This is the version that didn't have a pocket clip. It's designed to be carried in the depths of your pocket with your nickels, dimes, and quarters. And then the one that you can still find occasionally on certain knife retail sites, the PT MSC Performance. Yeah, they're all very similar. For today's video, we're only be looking at the Performance because these two are no longer being made, and as we'll find out, the Performance won't be made for very much longer either. Mick Strider is a knife maker out of Oceanside, California. He's been making knives for 25 years, and in March of this year, 2017, Mick announced that he would be closing Strider Knives and only be doing his customs from now on. For this review, it's going to be more of a retrospective for people who want to pick up a Strider on the secondary market than a review for people wanting to buy a new knife. Whenever I started collecting knives, there were basically 3 main grail knives people had in the high-end production market: a Sebenza, a Hinder, and a Strider. And the era of the Strider knife for less than $1,000 is going to be coming to a close. All that will be available will be the customs soon. Well, we'll talk about the MSC. The blade length is 2 3/4 inches. The handle length is 3.75 inches, giving a total knife length of 6.5 inches. The weight of the knife is between 3.1 and 3.2 ounces. I have some other knives for comparison. We have the Hinder MX18 in 3-inch, which is a little bit larger. The Spyderco Dragonfly, which is a little smaller. The Benchmade Osborne 940, which is a little larger. The Hobeck MK Ultra, which is a little smaller. The Chris Reeves Sebenza, which is approximately the same size. I'm going to say the Sebenza is a little longer. The Benchmade Mini Griptilian, which is also a little longer. The Lion Steel TRE, which is approximately the same size. And that's going to be the knife comparisons on size. The blade of the Strider PT and the MSC form is made of CTS 204P in a drop point configuration. It has a high flat grind with lots of belly. This particular version has the gray chromium nitrate finish, which is very handsome. The blade on the proximal part of the blade and the distal part of the handle has jimping. That's not painful but gives you good traction, and that's important for the 2 different configurations. You can hold the knife back here, or you can use the forward finger choil, at which point the end of the blade jimping is more useful for you. The blade, in addition to a forward finger choil, has a large sharpening ricasso, and that's a nice design feature because if you stab something, your finger slides forward, you're not going to cut it. Let me compare that with the Hinder XM18, which has a forward finger choil too. If you stab something, your finger flies forward, you're going to be cutting your finger. So I like the margin that the blade design of the the Strider PT gives us. The method of deployment is by this oval thumb stud, and it flips out nicely. This particular model has a little bit of lock stick and takes 2 hands to deploy. Also, it has a little bit of a thumb lug, and you can deploy it. The thumb lug stops against the handles and is the stop in the open position. For the stop in the closed position, it has a stop pin, which is secured with a Torx bit. The hardware are all Torx bit, and all of the Torx bit hardware face the clip side, the exception being the lower standoff is on the show side, and that was essential because the tab from the pocket clip goes into this show side hole. The pivot operates on phosphobronze washers, and it opens nicely. This particular lock has a little bit of lock stick. The lock is a frame lock, and they also make a non-locking version for New York City and Europe, who consider the safety of having a locking blade a little bit more than they can handle. We'll talk about the blade stops. As I mentioned, the thumb lugs of the blade stop in the open position, and the blade stops in the closed position close on the finger choil, not the sharpening ricasso, with this lock pin there. The knife has a pocket clip, which has the MSC, and the pocket clip is held by one screw, and they're able to do this because they have a tab that dives into the lower standoff to keep it from pivoting or swiveling or coming loose. The ergonomics of the knife are one of my favorite. As you know, whenever you cup your hand, it makes a little triangle here. You have your thenar eminence and then the pads over your metacarpal heads, and that is a triangle, and this knife just fits in there perfectly. Few other knives employ that, but the Southern Grind Spider Monkey does. As you can see, it has a triangular end there that fits nicely in that little area made in the palm of your hand whenever you cup your hand. So I really like the ergonomics of the knife, both the forward finger choil and the part that fits really nicely. So even though it's a small knife, you have a lot of knife left over if you use the forward finger choil, and in the back one you can get a nice grip on it too. So it's for either large hands or small hands. The action of the knife is just okay. It's got a thumb hole deployment, and it's not a shake shut knife. You really kind of have to push it shut. The signage on the knife, on the clip it has, as I've mentioned, the MSC, and then it has M Strider on the forward finger choil right there. And that's the only signage that the knife has. Now I'm going to do a comparison between the PT, the PTCC, and the PT MSC Performance. And first we're going to look at the handle. On the PT, which is also called the Lego, because I guess it looks like Legos, it has a textured G10 and it's squared off on the edges. The CC has a G10 too, but it's a different type of G10. It's smooth and it's rounded and chamfered and has smoother edges. And the Performance MSC has a squared off Lego-like appearance, but it's titanium both on the clip and the scale side. The clip side of both of these knives, of course, is titanium also. The pocket clip is different. The MSC and the PT both have pocket clips, and they're comparably the same. The pocket clip has a tab that dives into the handle. One difference is that the tab dives into the G10 backspacer on the PT, and it dives into the lower standoff on the MSC, but they both have pocket clips. In comparison, the CC has no pocket clip, but has a lanyard slot, which is absent in the PT and the MSC. The blades are also different. As you can tell, the blades are very similar on the PT and the CC. There are some differences. The sharpening ricasso is a little larger on the PT and a little smaller on the CC, and there is some chamfering on the top, swedging on the top of the blade with the PT, and there really isn't on the CC. And at this angle you can tell that it's kind of sharp looking on the PT and it's flat looking on the CC. The blade of the MSC is very different. It has a lot more belly. Its sharpening ricasso is much larger. This is the larger one of the two. The PT is larger than the CC, but this sharpening ricasso is larger still, and this has the coating with the chromium nitrate, which none of the other blades have. And there is some swedging on the MSC, but doesn't go as far up. It goes all the way to the jimping on the PT, and it just goes maybe halfway up on the MSC. The pivots are different also. As you can tell on the PT and the CC, there's the 3-point pivots that Strider has, proprietary pivot. And on the MSC, on the show side, it's a flat pivot. And then it uses Torx bit on the clip side. The hardware, the MSC, all the Torx bits are on the clip side with the exception of the lower standoff, and that's because the clip, as I'd mentioned, uses the tab to dive through the standoff, and so that's the only Torx bit that's there. On the CC and PT, you remove them from the show side, and the clip side are flat, just the opposite of the MSC. The thumb lugs are different also. On the PT and the CC, you can tell the thumb lugs have a squared off appearance, even though that they're round. And that's very different with the MSC, which has domed or rounded thumb lugs. Also, the way the thumb lugs interact with the knife, because one scale is G10, you have thumb lugs opposing titanium and then G10. On the MSC, it has a better configuration where you have thumb lugs bracing against titanium on both sides, so theoretically there won't be any wear or blade play over time. The locking closed, they lock open with the thumb lug against the scale. The MSC has a pin that is secured by a Torx bit, and it locks closed on the finger choil, you can see there. And the PT and the CC are the same in that their lock pin is buried inside the back spacer. It's further posterior. Instead of stopping on the finger choil, it stops on the sharpening ricasso. Concerning the lock bar on the CC and the PT, there is jimping on the lock bar, and you unlock it like that. And on the PT MSC, there is no jimping, but there's a chamfered edge here, and also the inside is chamfered, and that gives you, I don't know if you can appreciate this, a very sharp edge, which actually is a little painful whenever you press it, especially because this knife, if you open it really hard, has some lock stick, and you have to open it with 2 hands. The lock bar relief cuts are a little different also. I don't know why, but the smallest lock bar relief cut is on the CC, and the second largest is on the MSC, and then the largest lock bar relief cut is on the PT. The signage is different also. On the CC and the PT, you have the word Strider on the proximal blade, and then you have his maker mark on the other side of the blade, and that's the only signage on the knife. On the MSC, on the clip, you have the MSC, and then on the sharpening choil, you have M. Strider. And those are some of the differences in the 3 knives. So what are my impressions about the PT MSC? Well, I like it overall with the exception of the lock stick. There are some things that could be improved. For example, the clip rests on the lock bar, and so there's a theoretic problem, at least whenever you deploy it, you're pressing against the lock bar, and that's always a problem. The Sebenza carried the same problem, so a lot of my knife makers have it. The lock bar has no lock bar insert, nor does it have an over travel stop, and as a result, sometimes you can get sticking, as with this one, on the lock bar. The lock bar on the PT and the CC is a little bit lower than the handle scale. I don't know if you can appreciate that, but there are other knives that don't do that. For example, I have the Chris Reeve knives, and as you can tell, they make their lock bar side a little bit proud so that you can get your thumb in there and easily unlock it. And the Sebenza is the same way, you can easily unlock it. The Lion Steel TRE, same thing. They keep the lock bar a little proud so it's easy to get your finger in there. And really, you kind of have to push your finger down into a hole to get to the lock bar on the PT and the CC. A little bit difficult. And then on the MSC, the lock bar has the chamfering both on the inside and the outside, which leaves this sharp point which really kind of hurts your finger whenever you try to release this lock bar. And getting problems fixed is a little bit of problems, and it'll be even more problematic whenever now that Mick Strider has closed down business, because he charges $25 to get it looked at for repair, and then you have to pay shipping to get it there. This particular knife I sent to Mick's shop twice, and they were unable to fix the lock bar problems both times, and he just recommended that I send it back to Knife Center. Well, Knife Center charges a 5% restocking fee, which in this case would be over $36, plus you have shipping there. So shipping it back and forth, I've had it several months. It came with lock stick right out of the chute. And for $725, a knife needs to not have lock stick. I'm sorry. You can buy a lot of quality with that, especially the Chinese knives that all have lock bar inserts. Well, anyway, so you can buy a pretty good knife for $90. For example, the Kaiser Dukes is the best flipping knife I've ever had. And it's less than $90, and I've spent more trying to get this one fixed than it's worth, it seemed. But I hate to end the review on a down note. Would you buy this knife? I think if you were buying it new, I really wouldn't recommend it. If you're buying it on the secondary market so that you can have a Strider, I think it's a good idea. And now that Strider shop is closing, they'll only become more expensive. I wouldn't, if you had a new one, I would send it directly back to the retailer, because Mick Strider sometimes isn't able to fix his lock bar issues. Well, because of the lock bar issue, I can't recommend it if you're just buying it to have a knife and you're not a collector. But the Strider knives will always be historically important, especially with collectors. This is a knife review farewell to the Strider PT. It's been the lightest and best knife from Strider Knives, and it's a little like saying goodbye to a good friend. Well, thanks for watching the House of Wisdom Lightest and Best, and we'll see you on the next video.